last week, and time flies, right? And we're going to finish that up this evening because we have some more. We didn't get through all of my notes, so we'll spend a little time finishing up long-suffering, and then we'll go to kindness. When we look at, as we continue with what long-suffering, in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 14, we're instructed, be patient with everyone. So here's our instructions for patience, which is demonstrated before all men, not just our families, friends, and fellow Christians. It tells us to be patient with everyone. Everyone includes your spouse, children, employer, neighbors, waitress, slow drivers, people who make mistakes, etc. Undoubtedly, the impatience and short tempers of professing Christians has greatly hindered the cause of Christ among non-believers. And then in Proverbs, the 14th chapter, verse 29 says, he that is slow to wrath is of great understanding, but he that is hasty of spirit exalteth folly. And then also in Proverbs 16, verse 32 says, he that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. So when we think about long-suffering, patience is basically what it is. When we think of those things, and we think about being a Christian, it's our duty to be patient. Is it easy to be patient? No, it's not easy to be patient. And where we talked last week about athletes and that they train and they work at it, I believe it's the same thing as a Christian. We have to work at, the Spirit is in us, and we have to work at showing those characteristics of the Spirit every day of our lives. And patience is probably one that's tough. For me, it is, but I know I have to be better at it. In 1 Corinthians 13, our love chapter, when we look at verse 4, the first definition of love given by Paul is that love is patient. The second one is love is kind, which was what we'll talk about later this evening. But so when we think about the importance of patience and long-suffering, we have to really work at that to do that. So here's just some things that, as we work towards that, in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 2, says, with all lowness and meekness, with long-suffering, forbearing one another in love. In Colossians 1:11, it says, strengthen with all might, according to his glorious power, unto all patience and long-suffering with joyfulness. We kind of talked about that last week, about that long-suffering with joyness, and how that's almost a contradiction. That when you think about, Rachel mentioned after class, she didn't mention it during class, but she talked about, I must have been in her classroom, and Rachel teaches second graders. So you can imagine how many second graders do you have on a typical day? 26 second graders. So when we talk about patience, 26 second graders would be quite a bit to handle and keep. So we do have to take our hat off to our teachers who, like Rachel, who show patience with those children. And but as Christians, it's our job, it's our responsibility to do that, not just as because it's our job, but it's because it's what we do as Christians. Colossians 3 verse 12 tells us to put on therefore as the elect of God, holy and beloved, bowels of mercies, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, and long-suffering. Short-temperedness is a common trait of some people. Do you hear people say, that's just the way that I am? They use that as an excuse. Do we buy that? No. It's like anything else. It's if you work at it, but if you don't work at it, then you can use that as an excuse, but that's all it is an excuse. We're not, as our nature, that way. We basically, because of our habits, we become that way, short-tempered and short-fused. When we think about long-suffering, controlling it will stand one in good stead in the areas of our life, in our home and neighborhood, workplace. While all Christians are to be long-suffering, it develops to a higher degree as one matures in age and knowledge. Long-suffering would prevent all-night business meetings, which we don't have business meetings here now. We have elders. So back in the day when you did have business meetings where there were no elders, I'm sure that those meetings can be long as you try to make decisions for the church. Many churches, lack of long-suffering creates churches that split, words that never should have been spoken. It would prevent harsh judgments of actions that spring from immaturity and or lack of knowledge of all facts. A lack of long-suffering is manifested by ascribing to other bad motives when we have misinterpreted actions or words. We talked about that last week, where we're not sure what other people's situations are. We make assumptions, and they're typically not right. Whether it's a person who maybe can't hear, we don't know what kind of day that they've had, or those type of things. So as Christians, in Hebrews 10:36 says, "For you have need of patience, that after you have done the will of God, you might receive the promise." So listen to that verse again. "For ye have the need of patience, that after you have done the will of God, you might receive the promise." Does that imply that we could lose the promise because of impatience? Yeah, it does, doesn't it? So it's not just a matter of I'm not patient, I can't work on that, and I'm just going to be who I am, and that's who I am, I'm not going to change. That could keep us out of heaven. So it's not a matter of I'm just a rude person, or that's my nature. It's not your nature. So as Christians, it's our duty to be patient, long-suffering. Okay? Any comments on long-suffering? Yeah, Bill talks about sleep deprivation, lack of sleep, and basically our health could have a lot to do with our patience levels. Angst. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes we overcommit, don't we? Yeah, I could do that. Oh, yeah, I could do that. And then when time comes, did I tell two people at the same time I was going to be in two different places? And we haven't perfected that ability yet to be in two places at one time. So yeah, sometimes we say things before we speak, or we speak before we think, and it creates problems. But I think the lack of sleep and all those other things are things we have to work on. We can use those as an excuse and as I'm sorry, I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, so I'm rude to you. And I think we have to be careful of that, because there's no excuses when it comes to the judgment. We could try to make excuses, but that's not going to fly, right? Other comments on long-suffering or patience? Yes? Yeah. And that's a good point. And what she says is that sometimes because we're short or something, we might make a statement, and then later on we realize maybe it's the way that their expression, and you think, did they take that the wrong way? Now there's two things we can do with that. We can just say, or we could do what you did. You make a phone call and you say, hey, I'm not sure but how are you doing? I mean, that's obviously something we should do, because it's easy just to assume it. I read into it wrong, that they're okay. But when we talk about splits in churches, where do they start? They start with misunderstandings, don't they? A lot of times it might be something that wasn't said, that someone thought was said. Relationships, same thing. When we don't communicate properly, where did you just say what I thought you said? And we verify those things. If we did that in the world, think about how better the world would be. Think of how less wars there would be if leaders would talk about, did you really just do what you said you did, or what have you? It's the communication. But as Christians, we think of Christ and how patient he was and how he lived his life, and he lived his life as an example for us. And so we have to think about, if I say that I'm a Christian, it's not their duty to come to me. It's my duty, if I think I've wronged them, to go to them and say, hey, if I misspoke, or if I made a joke at your expense, I apologize for that, and that wasn't what it was intended. If we would do those things, we would be a whole lot better off. We wouldn't have people just not happy with life in general, and we wouldn't have the splits that we have in churches, and on, just misunderstandings. Good point. Anybody else? Yes? Point. Lindsay basically says that we need to be humble and think about other people, and we can't always apply our the way we've raised. Like you said, maybe somebody doesn't do it the same way you did it, but that doesn't make it wrong. And how we come off as people, but being humble and not always having to be the person who's right in the situation where there's really not a right or wrong. And that's tough for people to say, okay, I'll say you're right on that one. That's okay. I mean, it's not going to change the outcome as long as we remain friends, and that's what's more important. And if we're Christians, especially, it's easy to do it here that we're Christians, but it's when we go outside of this room in the world, that's when it really magnifies that. How am I being? Like you said, somebody cuts you off, and we talked about that before, just the way we act. And I always think about those things. So I think about, maybe the next person behind that car is somebody from church. So, obviously, we're always watched by God. But yet, sometimes you think about, well, if I act a certain way and turn around, that person is actually from church or something. I mean, that's why we should always assume that someone from church might see me when it is God who sees us. But yet, because we think we're incognito, we can act that way, and that's not right. Anybody else? Okay, so we'll move on. Our next item is kindness. And the way I want to start kindness is Acts chapter 20, verse 35. And basically what Acts 20:35 says, it is more blessed to give than to receive. So I want to talk about that and think about that for a moment. When we think about what God has planned for us, and we think about the life that we have to live as Christians, and we think about, as we'll get into kindness today, but I think that scripture there, that verse, if we would take that attitude, that it is more blessed to give than to receive. How many people in here know that there's actually a day, random act of kindness day? Lindsay knows. Yeah, I wasn't quite aware of it. I guess maybe I've heard it in the past, but we actually have. It started here in 1999, or 1995, I'm sorry. But the Random Act of Kindness Day is a day to celebrate and encourage random acts of kindness. It's just a day to celebrate kindness and the whole pay it forward mentality. That's kind of how it started. And, There was a movie back years ago, Pay It Forward, and it's loosely based on a book, but the whole concept there was a middle schooler basically had to do a project, and his project was do acts of kindness. It's sad as a nation and as a world that we have to have a day, just one day. There's 365 of those in the year, right? So only one day I have to be good, I have to be kind. It's sad. It's good that we bring that to attention, but when you think about, I'm only going to do it today because it's the day of kindness. Now, and I don't know what you have or haven't done yourself. I know I've bought people's coffee before at Starbucks, the person in front, and I guess at Starbucks it might be $3 or $4, but I don't know what they'll just say. I'll buy their coffee, and there was a reaction for something like that. It makes their day, and I don't know if you've been on the receiving end, maybe where someone's just did something good for you. I'm sorry.
Somebody paid for my groceries.
Wow, Nancy. Nancy said somebody paid for her groceries. Wasn't very much, but still, it was a lot to you. Yeah. So, yeah, you can't believe it. But when you think about that, and if we go to Facebook for a second, but one of the Hillier communities, sometimes you'll see a post where a person will say, "Hey, whoever was in line behind me in the Ford Bronco or whatever, thank you for buying my coffee. It made my day." And the point is, it's a minimal amount of money, but yet the effect it has on people is so much. But what's more important is as you're the giver, you see their reaction. And so I think when we look at this verse, that it's more blessed to give than to receive. If I'm giving, it's a blessing to me because I'm seeing, and maybe you don't see the results of what you do because they're in the car in front of you, or you're just randomly through my work I have to give to United Way, or what you do, and you contribute to the church, and you may not see everything that the church does, but we help a lot of people. But the fact that you give, the blessing that you give for that, and what it does for you inside, knowing that it's helped someone who needed it, whatever that might be. So there's a random act of kindness out there. Kindness defined is the quality of being friendly, generous, and considerate. It's a kind act. Some words that are involved with kindness are affectionate, gentleness, warmth, concern, and care. One way to be kind is to open your eyes and be active when you see people in need. Debbie? Sure. Right. No, that's a good point Debbie makes, that sometimes people give and we're like, oh, no, I don't need it, when you do, because it's our pride. But it does give them an opportunity. I mean, it's when somebody is giving, they're giving, and it's for them also, not just for you, for the receiver. Good point. In Proverbs chapter 21, in verse 21 says, whoever pursues righteousness and kindness will find life, righteousness, and honor. Discourtesy is rampant in our world today. There's an increase in bad manners, rudeness, coarseness, vulgarity, and lack of respect. It doesn't hurt to be gracious and thankful when someone has gone out of their way to help. You show courtesy and good manners when you do so. To pursue something, as it says in there, in Proverbs, is to chase after. We have a little dog, and usually if we take her for a walk, she's got to be on a leash, but if she gets out the front door, she takes off. And then what happens is, it's a chase. Halfway, she knows the normal walking, so she goes halfway down the street, just kind of staying ahead of me as I try to catch her. And so the chase is on. We know what it's like to chase. I'm sure those who have animals, bigger animals, cows and bulls and all those things that farm, do a lot more of that. The Meadows aren't in here because that's what I was looking for. Mark Meadows or Cole. But and if you know what it is to chase, it's activity. It's active. You have to do it. So when you think about that verse, Proverbs 21, and it says, whoever pursues, chases righteousness and kindness will find life, righteousness, and honor. So is it a job for us to do that? Should it be a job for us to do that? Shouldn't be. Because if we pursue that, if we chase that, then we get, in return, it says we get life, righteousness, and honor. So by chasing after chasing after kindness, we get in return life and righteousness and eternal life. So every day you are presented with a situation that allow you to be courteous to others. A simple acknowledgement to each person that you meet, that even if it's only with eye contact or a nod. Wait a minute, let me start back. Basically, it starts with, we make a choice each day when we get up. How we're going to arm ourselves, what we're going to wear. It also comes to kindness. What am I going to be today? Am I going to be kind? Am I going to be the get off my lawn guy? Am I going to be whoever? But we make a choice when we do that. And so if our choice is, I'm a Christian, so today my prayer is, help me, Lord, to be more Christ-like. Help me today as I start my day, that I look for opportunities to be kind, opportunities to give. If we look for those things, but every day you're presented with situations that allow you to be courteous to others. A simple acknowledgement to each person you meet, even if it's only eye contact, a nod, or a smile, is a step in pursuing kindness for life. Be sincere and genuine. Your efforts must be honest and heartfelt as you create pleasant and agreeable experiences for everyone you interact with. Now, in the last year, how hard has that been? How hard is it for me to express how I am when I'm like this? Can you tell if I'm smiling or if I'm what? So, eyes can tell a lot, yes, yeah. But it's nice to be able to smile at people and say, have a good day. And I grew up in Kentucky. I'll blame it on Kentucky, but I open doors for people. I hold doors for people. Not everybody says thank you, and that's okay. I don't yell at them because they don't return the favor or say thank you, but there are opportunities that we have. And as a Christian, we should look for those opportunities every day while we're out there to make sure that we make somebody's day. And maybe it's that simple, because we do smile with our eyes, or we say hello, or maybe I see a lady that's in her 70s or 80s, and I say, hey, good looking. You know, what do you think that's going to do to her? Now, if her husband's behind her, probably not much for me. Pardon me? Yeah. But it's just a simple, but make it some type of a statement to somebody that just kind of, you see their smile and you, oh, thank you. Or when you see the military who, in Veterans Day is coming up, when we see them wearing the hat, I always say, thank you for your service. No matter, and I don't have to buy them a meal, I see them just walking, and I'll say. So we need to work the Spirit, the fruit of the Spirit that we're studying. We need to work to make sure that we show that in our lives every day of our life, as Christ did. Jesus wasn't a 5-day-a-week, 2 days off, was he? No, he wasn't. We know that Jesus had compassion. The shortest verse in the Bible is where? John 11:35, and it is Jesus wept. Why did Jesus weep? Because Lazarus had died. So there was a time that he was compassionate. I mean, he cried, he wept, because Lazarus, who he loved, had died. He brought him back to life, but Jesus showed kindness himself. We talked about the random act of kindness. Patience, that's why.
Yeah. So my kids are very familiar with a lineup, I guess is a way to put it.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, are you teaching second graders?
No, I'm teaching high schoolers who have been through the system.
Okay. Okay.
And so they get off this wall, and I'm like, okay, smile for me, and they go, stare at me, right? And so like between that first picture and that second picture, every time I try to find something. So I'll be like, Robert, you have the nicest eyes. Does anyone ever tell you that? Or like, I'll say, like, your smile's so pretty, or just like something that second picture is always so much better because it's just something genuine. And it's something
You were kind to them.
right. It's that split second moment because I'll say it and then I'll take it.
Yeah.
I don't even hesitate.
Yeah.
And so like that split second moment where they're like, oh, someone's giving me a genuine compliment. I'm not in the mugshot lineup. Like it makes all the difference.
Yeah.
So like when you're doing those acts of kindness where you're not seeking anything in return. Because like I'll tell him like, oh, you're so handsome, waiting for him to tell me I'm pretty. But like when you're doing those things where you're not looking for something back,
Sure.
you can see the like genuine connection people feel in those moments.
Sure. Yeah, and Carly, obviously those who are at home can't hear that. Carly talked about she teaches the school. She's in charge of taking pictures of students who are high school, and some know what a lineup is, and she'll take two pictures. Usually the first picture is not, but then she makes some type of a comment, an act of kindness to say something good about them, and even if they're got a tough exterior that they put on, still it breaches that barrier they have up there because she says something personal about them, whether it's they have good eyes, a cute smile, something about them, and then automatically there's a little bit of a, so with that split second, she gets the picture, and it's much different. We all like that. I mean, we're all like that. We all like to have, we don't have to be praised, but we all like positive as opposed to negative. And so if we like that, it's in the same token that others do also. And I think that's why Jesus says it's more blessed to give than to receive. So if we have that mentality that I'm looking to make someone's day by a simple statement, it doesn't cost a thing to say something nice to someone. And we need to go out of our way to do those things. And when you, if you are out at a restaurant and you know someone's overworked, rather than add on to their burden with a lot of bad, just simply say, "It's okay. I'm in no hurry. Take your time. It's okay." If you're reassuring, it takes pressure off. And as Christians, we should be that because we can make someone's day just a simple statement that we make, and eye contact and those things. So, any other comments, Bill? Yep. If you were involved with Fort Hill, Joe Edgerly. By just doing what we're all supposed to do. Yeah. 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 Exactly. And that's what, I think that's what it's telling us here, that we all should be a Joe Edgerly. And Bill mentioned Joe Edgerly because he was kind of known as somebody who always showed kindness. And that's what we all should be. We all should be that person that exemplifies that every day. If we're Christians, and if you're a Christian, you have the fruit of the Spirit. You have these in characteristics. It's what you choose to do with them. We study and we know the Word, but if I just sit on it and don't let my light shine, what do the kids say about this? What do? We don't put it under a bush, do we? Or a bucket. Yeah, we don't, we show it off. It's simple, but that's the concept we have to have as Christians. Kindness is something we all can do. I mean, you don't even have to go to college to learn how to be kind. We know that, don't we? Kids, it's funny because my grandchildren, they were at Goddard School, and now they're the 3-year-olds at a school in Florida. But they always send pictures. They would send pictures of your kids. And so in the racist world that we live in today, when you see these 2- and 3-year-old kids, they don't know color. They don't know anything else other than it's Tommy, or it's Johnny, or it's Becky, or whoever it is. That's all that they know. Kindness is there. It's what happens to people like Carly talked about, who go through a system who don't have that in their life, and they end up on the wrong side, and there's no one there to basically shine that light. Okay, it's an accident. That's
He comes in my room because he knows when he comes in, I'm going to give him a snack if he wants one. I'll sit down, I'll ask him about his day, and he doesn't give that when he's home.
yeah.
He doesn't. He gets. Don't know why you have an ankle on.
Yeah.
Yeah. He doesn't know why. But like, it's just having that sense of like, this person's going to take care of me. I can go to them. He doesn't know my class is a great student. Like a lot of kids, they just have that one like. We use the word champion. If you can be a champion for someone, it makes the world of difference.
And what Carly talked about there is kind of what we talked about last week, where we don't know what their home life is like or anything else about them. We don't know whether they're living out of a car. We don't know. But we can be kind to everybody, no matter what. We can assume they don't have, and so we can provide them some smile, something just to brighten up their day. Some of you may not know who Glenn Campbell is or was, but he had a song, and his song was "Try a Little Kindness." Now, I didn't know that this was a song that was, and it was in the 70s, so, but it says, it's kind of interesting because it says, if you see your brother standing by the road with a heavy load from the seeds he sowed, and if you see your sister falling by the way, just stop and say, you're going the wrong way. You got to try a little kindness. Yes, show a little kindness. Just shine your light for everyone to see. And if you try a little kindness, then you overlook the blindness of narrow-minded people on the narrow-minded streets. Don't walk around down and out. Lend a helping hand instead of doubt. And the kindness that you show every day will help someone along the way. You got to try a little kindness. You got to show a little kindness. You got to let your light shine. So, but basically, when you think about that song, we see people every day in different walks of life. We don't have the opportunity always to help, but when we do, as Christians, we should do that. And especially when maybe we see Christians, fellow Christians, who are going the wrong way. Or maybe you see it, maybe if we're playing golf, and you see a fellow Christian who gets angry because he hits the shot bad, and he's doing something that he shouldn't do, then maybe that's where we need to do a little correction. But as Christians, we need to walk that path. And we need to help each other. When we look at the verses that we've talked about, a lot of it is love one another. Be kind to one another. I mean, that's our instructions. What do we tell our kids as parents when you have more than one child? Get along with each other. You don't want to separate them. Sometimes you have to separate them, but basically it's just get along. Be kind to one another. And that's how it should be in the church. That's how it should be in our world. Anywhere that I am, that should be around me is kindness, not the opposite. Sure. blind lead the blind. Yeah. 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 And see, that comment, you made my day, that's where it's more blessed to give than to receive, because you received more than you gave in that comment. Yeah. Any other comments that anybody has at this point? Yes. Train up a child in the way he should go. Yes. It should be their nature because of what they're taught and what they see. And that's where we have to be careful as drivers with our little ones in the back seat when we beep and honk and do things that we're telling them not to do. So it's important that we live what we say. And if we're Christians, if we think of Christ, did Christ have opportunities that he could have just blown people away? I'm sure he did, but that wasn't what his purpose was. As Christians, we can have opportunities to go off on someone, and that's not the way we do. Israel's wife owns a restaurant. I'm sure she could tell us all kinds of stories of customers who aren't happy, and they get very, very, very aggravated. And what's sad is there's probably some of those people who left church and went to eat at that restaurant, or ate at that restaurant and then went to church and didn't feel anything bad about the way they acted. And so as Christians, we always have to, the Spirit working in us, we have to do those things. Kindness is something that's not an option, because if we look at patience, if patience can keep us out of heaven, lack of kindness could probably do the same. So we'll get more into this next week. We didn't really get into it much at all, but Jesus urges his followers, if someone wants to sue you and take your tunic, what does Jesus tell us to do? Let them have your cloak also. If someone forces you to go 1 mile, go another. Go 2 miles. So Jesus tells us that, yes, sometimes we're going to be taken advantage of. But our job's not to, what's the saying, do unto others before they do it unto you. That's not the rule, is it? That's the world's rule. But we're to basically do unto others as we would have them do unto us. So I think that's our time for now. Any other comments before we close? All right, thank you.